and I'm going to be talking about effective models for integrating mobile devices into learning. I just want to explain one thing that might happen. I am right now in the United States in the Eastern Seaboard, Eastern time zone. So it is 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So it is during my school day. I'm in the Frisch School. I found a pretty private room to present this webinar in. I don't expect to be interrupted, but you might hear a bell or an announcement in the background, at least at certain points, because this is during the school day. Hopefully that will enhance the presentation that we're going to be talking about teaching and learning. And you're going to hear at least a little bit of the sounds of at least what in a North American high school teaching and learning sounds like. I see we have people from the West Coast, from Phoenix, Arizona. I know there are people from Israel and probably from other parts of Asia and Europe as well. It's very exciting to be presenting this webinar. So, and at any moment, if you'd like to chat, I will see the chat throughout, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to mostly do most of my lecture and only pay attention to the chat if someone's chatting that there's a problem with the technical part of the lecture, but the actual substantive questions, I'm going to hold off toward the end. So after the presentation is over, I will leave time in this time slot, definitely for at least 15 minutes of your questions. Okay, so obviously, when it comes to teaching with mobile learning in the classroom, so we have to really recognize the fact, and you see in this picture that you have the traditional learning model, people learning from books, and then next to it you have the iPhone. And people view the mobile device, the iPhone, the Android device, the iPad, even the laptop, as the distraction to the learning, that real information comes from books. And obviously, as I'm going to present, there is some research about that might confirm some of those feelings. However, there is a very large body of alternative research about the benefits of these devices. And I could just tell you from the perspective of the students I teach on a daily basis, and I teach 14 to 18-year-olds in my school, they view the phone as their primary source of information, and certainly the laptop. When they see a screen, they see knowledge. Now, we want them to be reading books, and we encourage books, and our library is full of books, but the reality is that the first place they're going to go for information is the computer, or maybe they're even just going to ask Siri on their phone. So if we have a choice here. We can either fight against that, which I think is a losing battle, and also I think philosophically, my goal is to teach students how to deal with the world that they live in, not to fight against it. Or we can find the ways, the reasons why they think, and we think as well, if we think seriously that these devices are so important for our learning, and then find ways to try to integrate that into the classroom. So let's talk a little bit about this iPhone. And I want to start with a story that happened just last week in my school. So I had a teacher who came to me, and we have my school is a large school, thank God. We have over 700 students. We have students of many different abilities. We have high honor students. We have students who are, I guess, above average. And then we have students with different types of learning differences and students who have different types of what we would call in the United States individualized education plans, IEPs, that they need special support. So there are students who might be very intelligent, but they either because of some reading difficulty like dyslexia or some visual processing, they need to have readers read their tests to them. And they have this on their IEP, and they're legally obligated as a school. And also, honestly, we're morally obligated to find people to read their exams to them, because this is what they need to succeed in their learning. And this obviously is a very onerous process. If we have, I don't know, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 kids in the school who need readers for their test, that means we have to find someone who's going to read their test to them. We have to coordinate. We have your average student in my school is taking somewhere like 9 or 10 different subjects. They could have tests 2 or 3 or 4 times a week, and they need to have readers for these tests. You can imagine the staffing involved in finding these readers. And not just that, but the fact that the readers you're going to find for the test are not necessarily going to be best for that exam. So for example, if a student is taking a test in social studies and they have a reader who's a gym teacher who doesn't really know the subject, or certainly if they're taking a test in science and the teacher is mispronouncing the scientific word terms because we find a reader for the test, that reader is not really benefiting the student, but obviously it would be impossible to find the student's chemistry teacher to read the test to them because that teacher is also teaching 100 other students. So someone from our learning center came to me and said, I have an idea, run it by me. And the idea was a great idea. She said, what if we got the teacher who is actually writing the test to also tape record themselves? I'm purposely using that term. You see your little tape recorder over here, and I guess I'll just show a pointer. We have a tape recorder right over here on the screen. Right there, right? That's our little tape recorder. And they wanted to tape record themselves giving the test to the student, and that way it would solve a lot of issues. The student could play it back and listen. So therefore, the student would get a reader to read the test to them. The reader would be the student's own teacher. The teacher would therefore be pronouncing the words correctly and giving the right inflection, and therefore not confusing the student. And with headphones, the students could be taking the test in the same classroom as the other students. Except we had a problem. Does anyone have a tape recorder anymore? I know this was my favorite. I remember once when I was in grade 8, that was when I was 13 years old, and I won an essay contest. And the first prize in the essay contest was I won a tape recorder, just like the one on this screen. And it was very exciting to me. I was ecstatic. I got a tape recorder. I had tapes. I could tape myself. I could make music. I could sing. I could do funny voices. No one has a tape recorder anymore. And even if we did, do we have a tape player? And how do you get the tapes back and forth? And then I pointed to the teacher and I said, what type of phone do you have? And of course, the teacher had, like virtually all the teachers in my school, and probably most of the people you come in contact with, a smartphone. In this case, it was an iPhone. This would have been equally, the solution I'm going to discuss would have been equally helpful if the teacher had an Android phone, by the way. And I said, do you realize that on your iPhone, you have a voice memo app? People don't realize this. So for example, I'm just going to do a little bit of screen sharing. So let's try this out for the very first time. And I'm going to go to my iPhone right now. And you see my iPhone on the screen, I hope. And I'm going to click on voice memo. And I'm going to start recording on my phone. So right now I'm recording on my phone the fact that I'm recording a webinar about using voice memo, because every teacher has either an iPhone or an Android device. And they can record the test questions on their phone so that a student who has a learning difference, who needs the test read to them, can then later listen to the recording after we discuss how we're going to share the recording to the student. Then I press stop. And I click done, and I name this, I guess, new recording, and I click save, right? And now the teacher has recorded their test using the phone that they have in front of them all the time. So every teacher has the ability. Now, how are we going to get this test to the students? So then we go to the recording, and there's a little share button, and we can share this to the Google Drive, which we use all the time extensively in our school, where I'm going to talk about Google Drive later, but I'm sure you're familiar with Google Drive. We are a Google Apps school, so I can copy this recording to my drive. And once I copy the recording to my drive, I can then share the recording, once I copy it, to a special account that we use for testing. And then when we give the students, we have Chromebooks in our school for testing. Let me just stop sharing. And I'm going to go back to the slideshow. We have Chromebooks in our school that we use for student testing for students who have a different individualized need, that they have to be typing their test answers instead of writing them. Chromebooks are very inexpensive. We do a special login to the Chromebook. That's a testing login which the students don't have access to. So if they just record using the voice memo feature on their phone, and then they share that recording to their Google Drive, And they share from their Google Drive to the special testing login. We give the kid a Chromebook, which we have available. We give the kid a headphones, and they can listen to the test read to them in the same exact room as everybody else. And what has done this? What has facilitated this solution? The mobile device. Every teacher has their phone, and their phone has a tape recorder. Now, if you think about it, one of the things that made the iPhone so incredible, and we don't really give credit, it's now, I think, the 10th anniversary. It might even be like this month. I don't remember when exactly Steve Jobs introduced the iPhone, but I believe it was in January of 2007. So maybe it was less than a month ago was the 10th anniversary of the introduction to the iPhone. Every iPhone has in it a tape recorder. As well, an iPhone has in it a GPS. So any of you are familiar, this was my Garmin Newbie, which I was so excited 10 years ago to have, that now I could go from place to place using my own GPS. iPhone, as we know, and Android phones have it built in, and you can even use a Waze app that tells you where the traffic is. Every iPhone has built into it a beautiful video camera. You can read newspapers. Obviously, it's a computer. This, I don't know if you remember, but this is what a video editing, actually a film editing table, because movies used to be made by film back in the day, and you had to cut the film yourself and splice it together. iMovie is now standard, and you can get many apps to edit movies on an Android as well. So you can edit movies from your iPhone. Obviously, as a camera on your phone, remember these disposable cameras? We thought were so cool because we could purchase them for, I don't know, $2, $3, $5 in United States money, and then we give it back and and then we could wait a couple of days. Then we had 30, what was it? What was a roll of film? I think 32 pictures that would come back to us. That most of them were not good because we didn't take good pictures because we didn't see the picture after we took them. Every phone has a built-in camera that's now almost as good as the high-end cameras. Obviously, it's a phone, like our old phone, but this we carry with us. It's a television set because we can watch movies on our mobile device. And I even left out the fact that it's also a radio and it's also a Sony Walkman. All of these different purposes, the tape recorder and the GPS and the video camera and the computer and the newspaper and the video editor and the camera and the telephone and the television set and the radio and the music player are all on this. Your iPhone, your Android phone. It has all of that. And by the way, I even ignored the fact that it also has the internet, and the internet has so much that we take for granted. Now, we take this all for granted, but 10 years ago, there was no such device. And certainly 20, 30 years ago, it was unimaginable that someone would be carrying all of these things. So now the challenge is we have the ability to do almost anything on a mobile device that that most of us carry with us at all times, that high school students mostly carry with them at all times, that if you're teaching in elementary ages, you can get them a relatively inexpensive tablet device, whether it be an iPad mini or whether it be an Android device, and have it in their hands at all times. So now what? So that hopefully is something that I'm going to be addressing in the rest of this webinar. But I could tell you that in this case, it was a very tech-savvy teacher who came to me with the idea of the tape recorder for all the tests. And she had an iPhone, but she just didn't make the connection that, wait, my iPhone has the voice memo, and I can record, and I can share it to Google Drive from my iPhone, and then I can use that shared Google Drive to share it to the test. And then we have students being given Chromebooks anyways for testing. It was a matter of connecting the dots for her to realize that she had just solved the problem of the staffing and of the needs of the students for so many students in this specific scenario. So a lot of this is not, we know what the phone can do, but the question is, how do we use it in an educational, meaningful way? So first of all, just to realize, and let me just erase, I'm going to just see if I can delete this little arrow that I have there, which is distracting me. Just to realize that when it comes to the iPad and the iPhone, most of us view these devices as a distractor. So many of us teachers, even tech-savvy teachers, view it almost as the enemy in the classroom. And I don't disagree with you. A phone in a classroom can be very distracting. There are certain types of lessons. If I am a frontal teacher, if I am lecturing, just think of it right now. Okay, this is the big challenge of giving a webinar. You're on your computer and you're listening to this webinar, hopefully. There are 16 of you. How many of you are multitasking while you're listening to this webinar? It's very challenging. I think at least one person admitted it right there. 2 people have admitted it. Wow, okay. You're very honest people. Okay? And you're not giving your undivided attention because you have a device in front of you. Shahjad listening from his phone. You have a device in front of you that can do so many other things. But the problem is, if you're not paying full attention to what's going on, and obviously this is something that's going to be, an online class, and you could do other things maybe. In the classroom, we want from our students, most of all, their attention. So I don't discount the fact that there is a distraction factor when it comes with the phone. And this is funny. You're 100% with me. And I see you guys are with me because you all responded when I asked how many of you are multitasking. And if you would have been truly out in a different place, then you wouldn't have realized, in the classroom, a kid can get so eagerly texting that you walk right up to them and then they look up and they jump away in fear because they had no idea that the teacher was standing right in front of them the entire time. Any of us who are teachers, we're probably nodding our heads right now because we know when that happens. So I agree the iPhone can be a great distractor. But as I showed, and as we're going to show throughout this, the iPhone is also in the computer. The mobile device is also a tremendous tool. So the question is how we can utilize it effectively. As well, one other point that I'm not going to focus on a lot. When it comes to the iPad, certainly, and the iPhone, it's not really great for typing. A laptop is much better. I would recommend a Chromebook. I can tell you one thing that drives me nuts in my own classroom. I am very particular about the fact that when they are taking notes, I don't allow them to have their phone. I'm not one of those teachers who confiscates the phone and then brings it up to the office, and then the kids have to beg and plead with the secretary, please let me give it back, or maybe they have some punishment I don't even know about. I don't do that. Maybe I'll tell them put it away. Maybe I'll put it on my desk until the end of the period. I don't want them to be taking notes on their phone. The kids all think they can, but the fact is, I'm not talking about the distracting factor, and I'm not talking about whether note-taking is a good idea using a device. We'll talk about that in a moment. But the screen size matters. It really does. And I really feel strongly that as a teacher, that a small mobile device can be very effective for certain things, but when you need to be doing something like typing up a paper or typing notes, it's limiting. You're going to write less and write less effectively because you're trying to peck all the keys with your finger or your thumb, and because the screen is not sufficient. So that is something I'm very particular about. I do let my students have devices in the classroom, computers, and maybe even an iPad that's a larger iPad, but anything less than that, it's just not really sufficient for the typing factor. So those are 2 things I just put on the table. I'm not having them write up Google Docs using their phone that much, although we're going to talk about Google Docs in a moment, and I recognize the fact that there is a distractor. However, at the same time, mobile devices can really improve learning outcomes. So I'm going to summarize some of the research. Obviously, I'll tell you honestly that this presentation is much more going to be about practice than about research. I'm trained as an educator. I'm working on a lot of research areas, but I'm really trained in the classroom and dealing with kids on a daily basis. So my goal is to give you lots and lots and lots and lots of good ideas. But I'll give you a little bit of a summary of at least the research as I see it. So just one research study that, and this is the website, you can look it up, and you see here the URL. So if you just Google the conversation, do mobile devices in the classroom really improve learning outcomes, I'm sure you'll be able to find this site. One thing to realize, one famous study, and this really what the question about students with writing difficulties. So there was a study recently that everyone is quoting, and that all the university professors love, which was a pretty well designed study about technology note taking in the classroom. I believe the name of the study, if I could get it exactly, was I might not have it in front of me right now, but there was a study about laptops in the classroom, and yeah, I'm just going to reference the study right now. The study was called "The Pen is Mightier." I'm going to type actually the name of the study into your chat because I think that would be beneficial. The study was called "The Pen is Mightier Than the Keyboard: Advantages of Longhand over Laptop Note-Taking." If you look that up, you'll find the study. It was from 2014, and they actually did a pretty rigorous study where they had students watch lectures, but it was TED Talk lectures, so they were lectures that were pretty engaging about interesting topics, but not esoteric topics, not topics that they naturally knew a lot of information about. And they had one group of students who were taking notes on a laptop. Note the laptop they were using to take notes with a laptop, not a phone. Also, the laptop they were using to take notes was not connected at all to the internet. So the ability to multitask was minimized. They had another group that were taking notes longhand, pen and paper. And then they would give them a distracting task for about a half hour or so. And then they would give them a test after that. You watched the lecture, you then were distracted. Now you're going to get a test. How well do you remember the lecture? And they found that the students who took notes in longhand rather than typing did better. They also found that a week later, if they gave a test without any preparation, neither group did well. Most kids will forget a lecture a week later unless they review for the lecture. But if they reviewed after the lecture, they found that the students who took longhand notes, meaning they wrote with their hands, and they reviewed their notes, did better than the students who typed. So they determined that note-taking by hand is preferential to type note-taking, and they had a theory behind it, which I think makes a lot of sense, at least in my own experience, that people can type nowadays much faster than they can write. And therefore, when someone's taking notes in longhand, there is definitely the possibility of nearly transcribing the lecture almost without thinking. Whereas, if someone was typing the notes using a keyboard, there's the possibility of merely transcribing the lecture without thinking. Whereas when you're taking notes in longhand, because you can't write as fast as you can listen, you have to process the information. You have to listen to the and then you have to determine what do I want to take notes on in this lecture, and that process of note taking, even if you never use the notes again, is beneficial for the learning. It's a very appealing study, and a lot of people like to quote it. However, that study has a couple of assumptions, which I'm not going to focus on. Now, obviously, if a student has difficulty writing by hand, then typing notes is definitely going to be beneficial to not taking notes at all. That's self-evidently obvious. So I'm taking that out of the table. But they were assuming in the study watching a lecture and taking notes. Now, I would grant you that if your primary mode of teaching is lecture-based, and therefore the only reason a student is using a device is to take notes, then you can have a fair argument that maybe taking notes in a notebook can be more beneficial than typing the notes either on a computer and certainly than typing the notes on the phone. Now, I could argue the other way. The one big argument I would give is that when you type notes, your notes are searchable afterwards. Also, when you type notes, your notes can last forever. Both of these things tend to not happen when you take longhand notes. So even if the longhand notes help in the retention, if your goal of taking notes is retention, writing notes by hand is better. If your goal of taking notes is retrieval, being able to get back the notes later on, then typing might be preferential. I know, for example, that when I was in when I was in university, not graduate school, I typed all my notes in graduate school. But when I was in university back 20 years ago, I took copious notes. I was very proud of my notes. I was a beautiful note taker. People used to photocopy my notes. I was the one that everyone used his copy of the notes for the final. All those notes are sitting in a crawl space in my house, hopefully not collecting mold. They are not at all accessible to me. I can't use them even if I want to. But one of the best decisions I ever made when I started teaching 19 years ago, even in the first year I was teaching in 1997, that's right, almost 20 years ago, was that I was going to take all my teaching notes by computer. And I must have been through, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 computers since 1997. But I have on my computer, somewhere buried in my computer, and it's fully searchable, so it's relatively easy to find, every single notes I ever took from my teaching dating back 20 years. And there are times I will reteach a lesson, a subject that I taught 15 years ago. Obviously, I will change how I teach it, but I can find my notes to begin with. That's the basis of my teachings. That's very powerful. And we're going to talk about a lot that with Google Docs. But that's just the lecture and the note-taking piece. But there's so much more that you can do with a computer, and you can certainly do with a mobile device. I'm going to give a lot of examples. And there were a number of studies. For example, a study called Learning in a One-to-One Laptop Environment, a meta-analysis. That was really analysis of a number of different studies. I'm just typing that, and you can Google that as well, which found when they did a meta-analysis of studies dating back to 2000, and they chose that on purpose because they thought the studies older might not be relevant anymore because the technology changes so much. They found that students using mobile devices and other types of technology in the classroom improved student-centered learning, which we're going to talk about. It improved the level of student engagement. Obviously, it improved what's called 21st century learning skills, which is not just the ability to use a computer, but really the ability to digest information, to analyze information, to evaluate information. I know that this is really all in the news right now, at least in the United States, because there's a term that I don't know if I even really heard of until 6 months ago that now is used almost every day, which is called fake news. Now, some of the fake news might be really fake. Some of the fake news might just be a rhetorical technique that someone is using when he wants to discount news that's not fake. But the point is that nowadays it is so easy to spread news that someone can make a website that looks like a perfectly reputable news source, and then via social media it could spread like wildfire, and all of a sudden a story that's completely not true can be viewed by millions of people as if it was true. Now, the only way to fight against fake news, and I know Facebook is trying to come up with an algorithm, and Twitter and the news sites, but really the only way to fight against fake news is to train our population and really our children, our students, on how to evaluate websites, how to evaluate news sites to determine what's real and what's fake. And that's really the 21st century skills. They also found that technology in the classroom, when used well, can increase equity. This is the double-edged sword. If everyone has a device, then everyone's equal. One of the challenges I know in my school and others is many schools have what's called a bring your own device policy. Certainly if you're talking about cell phones in the classroom, it's often going to be BYOD. We're not going to provide them with a smartphone. So what do you do about the student who doesn't have a smartphone? Maybe their parents can afford it, or maybe their parents just decide philosophically that my 14-year-old or my 15-year-old is not mature enough to have a smartphone. And honestly, although my 15-year-old has one, I totally see that and totally respect the parent to make that decision that their child is not ready for a smartphone yet because of all the distraction factors that we talked about. And therefore, there is the matter of equity that if one is going to use mobile devices in the classroom, even if it's a bring your own device environment, one has to have a relatively easy, low-key, non-scary way to give loaner devices for students who need, whether they be Chromebooks or iPads or other devices, so we can increase the equity. So now I've given you at least a little bit of the research against using technology in the classroom, specifically for note-taking, the research about technology improving student-centered learning, engagement, 21st century skills, and equity. I want to now go into the actual specific examples, which is really going to be what I'm going to talk about, at least for the next half hour or so, hopefully in this lecture. And at this point, hopefully I'll also become interactive with you a little bit, as much as I can over this vast medium of the world. So one of the things to know about the iPad and really about the iPhone as well is it really supports student-centered learning. And this has been found in every study. So as I said before, if your goal is to lecture, where the main person in the classroom is the teacher is the source of information, and the student's job is to be a sponge, to absorb the information, and then to spit it back on a test, then the phone and even the computer can be intimidating for that teacher. But if my goal is to help the student learn themselves, to put the learning in the hands of the student, then the device can be tremendously liberating, because I'm giving them activities where they can actually do so many things using their device. So let me just give you an example, and I'm going to be turning on screen sharing. I'm going to be doing this a lot. And if there's a problem with the screen sharing, if someone please just put it into the chat. And by the way, I will describe what I'm doing just in case for some of the more advanced people listening. This is a really neat trick that I'm doing right now. By the way, the bell just rang here, so that's why you might have heard it. I'm giving this webinar using a Mac computer, a Macintosh, and I have an iPhone, and I've connected my iPhone to my Mac. And when I do that, if I actually open QuickTime Player and start a movie recording, the recording can actually be my phone. So that's how you're seeing my phone on the computer using screen sharing, and so I can demonstrate things on the actual device. So we're talking about student-centered learning. So I know one of the things we love to do with the students is sometimes use the iPhone for iPad art. So there are a lot of different applications, and many of them are free. And so here's one. So they could be drawing on the phone. They could be doing all sorts of artwork with the phone, which is kind of really cool. As well, taking it one step further, and we're going to be giving other applications later in more detail, but they could even be making comic books on the phone. This is an app that I love called Bitstrips. So I could sit there and I could just edit the app and I could customize right now. So I'm going to add a bubble and I'm going to say, hello, how are you? And the guy looks a little bit worried, so I'm going to now make him a little bit happy. And this actually, if you think about it creatively, can be, you could do multiple scenes. So you could really have storyboarding where the students learn a lesson, and they could learn a lesson maybe I'm going to write the name in a moment. They could learn a lesson maybe the traditional way. This one's called Bitstrips. They could learn a lesson maybe in a traditional way. And then instead of a formal assessment, one could have them storyboard, make comic strips. And you see Bitstrips all over. Using this, Bitstrips has an iPhone app, Bitstrips has an Android app. Every app I'm going to show in this presentation is going to have an iPhone and an Android version. So this is just an example. In the iPastels, that one might be specific to the iPhone, but I can tell you that I guarantee you there are just as many art apps for an Android as well. And then even one step further, they can even do 3D design. So this is an app called 123D Make. And really, what you want to be looking for if you're doing 3D design using a phone, an iPad, an Android, is you want to be looking for a company called Autodesk. Autodesk is a leader in 3D design, and they give out almost much of their software to education for free, which is amazing. And so, for example, if you have a laptop computer or even a Chromebook, they can be doing 3D design using a website called Tinkercad, which is an Autodesk site, and then they could be downloading programs like 123D Design or Mesh Mixer by Autodesk, or they could download even a program called, I think it's called Fusion by Autodesk, and all of these programs are free. I'm just showing one from the phone, because that's what I'm talking about. So we're going to try to do something here using this device. So let's say I want to create something, and I just go like that, and now I'm going to click next, and now it designed a shape based on what I'm doing, and I'm going to click make, and then I can cut it. It's basically a 3D design. There's a number of these different types of apps, both for the iPad and the iPhone. 123D Sculpt is one that I believe works only on an iPad, but not an iPhone. So these are example of, just to show you, student-centered learning apps. Bitstrip, 123D Design. Another one is ThingLink, which is a great app, which lets you actually take pictures and create stuff on the picture. So here is some image data, and you can actually put on the picture a video. You can put on the picture text. You can put on the picture. So this is something that you can create for your students. I just saw a demonstration yesterday by one of my Hebrew teachers, and we learned Hebrew as a foreign language here, where they created pages of text that is part of their workbook that they read in the classroom. I'm going to just stop my screen sharing for the moment. And we're going to go back to the lecture. And they created pages of text, and I'm going as a picture. And then using the app ThingLink, which is an iPhone app, an Android app, and a web app, they were able to embed a recording of themselves reading the text to the student. Now, how did they record the reading of the text? Someone typed that. I'm not going to tell you. How was the teacher able to easily do that? They recorded themselves reading the text. They did a voice memo on their iPhone, absolutely. It's a free app. It's a tape recorder. They shared that with their Google Drive. They put it onto ThingLink. They also then found YouTube videos. I think that the text they were reading was about Theodor Herzl. So they found a YouTube video about Theodor Herzl that they put onto the picture. They found different types of activities, something called Quizlet, which we're going to talk about. I think Android has a number of different voice recorder apps. You should just search the Android store, and they have different types of voice recorder apps. I think there's one even called Voice Recorder, if I remember correctly. So works just as well as the iPhone voice memo. So they were able to make a recording of themselves reading the text. They were able to make a YouTube video of the text. They were able to make different types of interactive activity the student do with the text. And the students could go on their phone and they could do all this. They could obviously use an iPad or computer too. Now the students could even create it. So this is where the teacher is creating it for the student, or the student could create it for their other students in the classroom. Once again, the key is that we're supporting student-centered learning. We're putting, and by student-centered learning, I mean, instead of the teacher lecturing, the teacher being in the front of the room, being the source of information, the teacher is either giving the information to the student through a device that they can interact with, or the teacher is having the students, even better, finding the information themselves through their own interactivity with these various apps. Now I'm going to get specific. One example, and this is a very simple example, and this should be blatantly obvious to all of you, is Google Drive. We are a Google Drive app school, meaning that we have a Google Drive account through our schoolfrish.org. And it's relatively easy for a school to do that. So that way, every kid has their Google account by their name at frish.org. And a teacher can do easily activities where the students do all of the learning themselves using either their phone, although as I said before, I don't prefer they use their phone for typing documents, or an iPad or a Chromebook, which is also a very low-cost mobile device. You know, it doesn't have to be a fancy $1,200 Mac. It could be a $179 Samsung Chromebook, or their phone, and they could share it. So, for example, I just had a teacher today. Literally, while I was preparing for this lecture, a teacher shared with me she was beaming. She's teaching prophets, and she's teaching the Book of Kings. And she got to a bunch of kings in a row that they really weren't going to focus on in class. But she wanted them to know the information about the kings, who they were, who their father was, who their son was, how long did they reign. Were they good? Were they evil? Was there something special about them? Now, she was planning on giving basically a 40-minute lecture. Instead, she said, okay, guys, we're doing the next four kings. And what I want you to do, and she was going to create a table for them, and she was trying to figure out the best way to make a table, to make it pretty. She said, you have to research these four kings, and you have in front of you your mobile device, your Chromebook, or even your iPad. And you can go onto a website that has the Tanakh with translation, the Bible. My favorite site for Bible with translation is Sefaria, but there are any dozen of other sites. And find out this information for me and put it into a chart. I'm not even telling you how I want it charted. She was very open-ended in her assignment. Just make it into a chart and share it with me on Google Drive. Poof. 40 minutes, the same amount of time she would have taken to lecture. She did it with the students. Actually, she didn't do anything. The student did it themselves. Then they sent her a couple of dozen Google Docs. And then at the end of the period, she brought up the one that she thought was the best, where they really got the information clearly, and that one was shared with the class. The exact same activity, the exact same information, but where do you think the student learned more? Where the teacher had a beautiful graphic, I'll bet, mind you, where they put up the text, put up a chart of the different kings, or where the students got that information themselves. So sometimes, obviously, when it comes to sophisticated analysis, maybe a Socratic dialogue is much more significant in the classroom. But when it comes towards basic information that you have to teach, you have to ask yourself, is it worth it for me to lecture? I can just have the students find the information themselves. Or if I need to lecture, and I'm kind of foreshadowing a slide I'll have later, then maybe I should record a video of myself doing the lecture, either using an app on my phone or an iPad called Explain Everything, or just using voice memo so they hear me, or using just the fact that my phone is a camera and buying on Amazon for $5 a tripod that works with an iPhone or an Android, and they can watch a video of me doing it, and it's still much more student-centered than me being in the front of the classroom. So this is one example, Google Drive, where the students really, I mean, I think it's the most important, honestly. When you ask what's my favorite app to use in the classroom, I know it sounds like not exciting because everyone knows about it, but Google Drive is it. Because students can work independently, they can work with each other, they can work with the teacher, they can collaborate, they can store everything online, they can work from any device, they can start on a school computer, they can continue on their phone, and then they can come home and do it on their Chromebook. All in the same Google Drive, which is amazing. There are other apps here. I'm going to show one that you might not know about, but this is kind of cool, and I'm going to demonstrate this. There's an app called Sketch, which is from the Evernote family. You see it there. I don't think I need to type it. It's an iPhone app. It's also an Android app. And Sketch lets you mark up maps. You'll say, that's wonderful, but why would I use that in education? So let me just show you the example here on the screen. The teacher in world history is teaching about, I guess this is the source of the Pyrrhic victory, where the Greeks are fighting the Romans. And I think that the Greeks won, but they lost because it was the Pyrrhic victory. That's where the word comes from with King Pyrrhus. Someone can correct my history if I'm getting this one wrong. She had the students in Sketch marking up a map themselves of what was going on. They created this. It's a very simple app. I'm going to open up the screen sharing to show you. So let me go to my application window. And now I'm going to go into my iPhone. And hopefully you can all see it. If you can, please just write in the chat that you're having problems. And I'm going to open up Sketch, which should be here. Actually, it's in my Evernote folder. Sketch is a free app. By the way, I can just make a picture and use that as my sketch. So this is going to be a little bit meta and weird. Okay, there's my sketch. That's a little strange. But look what I'm gonna change. I'm gonna get rid of that one, and I'm gonna do something a little bit more realistic. So I'm gonna go to my camera roll, my photos, and I am going to go to my screenshots. And here's the screenshot of Quizlet, which I'm going to be using later. And I'm going to show you what you can do. So I can mark this up. I can make an arrow. I can make little informational arrows. I can put in some text. This is a Quizlet game. You're going to see Quizlet later. I can move it around. I can change the colors. Now you can imagine there are so many different activities where if a student is marking up a picture, how much they can do and then how much information they can gain and then give back to the teacher and share with them. And obviously there's a share button. And look, I can share it to all sorts of types of apps. So if I go here, I can share it to my Google Drive and then share it with the teacher. Or I can share it through Evernote or any number of other things. So Sketch is a great app for marking up things in an educational environment or really just yourselves. It's something people don't realize that they can just do, and it's free, which is awesome. So there's my screen sharing. I think I just turned off my screen sharing at the moment. So that's Sketch, which is just a great app that I really love, especially if I want kids to mark up stuff. Now we're going to go to a different category. So the first category of apps were student-centered learning apps, stuff like Sketch, stuff like Google Docs, that promote the student doing something themselves. One of the other thing, all the research shows that mobile devices are very powerful as assessment tools. And when I say assessment, I don't just mean there are two different types of assessment, and I'm going to actually type them over here so you can see them. I didn't put it on my slide. There's summative assessment, which means what we think of as a test. At the end of a unit, I just told them that in a week from now they're going to have a test on what we learned the last 3 weeks. We'll have a review sheet, we'll review, we'll have a test, et cetera, et cetera. That's important. But if all you're doing is summative assessment, then most of the kids are probably lost by the time you get there. What a good teacher does all the time is what we call formative assessment, which means every moment of the classroom I'm assessing to help them not just sum up the information, but form the knowledge during the lesson. And that could be just the form of walking up to the student and asking them a question. But in a mobile device, there are so many different ways that you can use a mobile device for this type of formative assessment. So for example, there's an app called Socrates. Socrates is an app on the iPhone and on the Android device that lets you create a quiz that the students can get into just using their phone or a computer. Every class has a room number, and that's how they get in, and they just put in their name. The quiz could be a multi-part quiz, or the quiz could even be just an exit ticket, which means I love exit tickets. You can't leave the classroom until you tell me what you learned today. Or if it's a math class, until you solve a problem on the board. And now that I'm testing the students, something I love to do is, and kids love this too, is let them test me. In other words, how well did you understand today's material? That's not a test really to them. That's a test of my teaching, so they can give their own feedback. And so Socrates is an amazing app like that. If you want to see it in action, I'll just open it up a little bit. Just to tell you one thing about Socrates, if you get the app, there are two different versions of the app. There's the teacher version and the student version. So I have the teacher version. When you look for it in the iPhone store or Google App Store, you're going to want to get Socrates Teacher for yourself. You're going to want to get Socrates Student for the student. So I could just do exit ticket. You'll see, by the way, that my room is 11755. That's my room number. And here is an exit ticket. And let's start an exit ticket right now. Okay, so my exit ticket is open with room 11755. So if you go to, right now, Socrates.com, maybe if you're multitasking, you could try to do that. And you put in student login. And you put in your room name. So let me just show you right now. I'm going to change my screen sharing settings. So if you go right now to, I'm going to stop sharing, and then I'm going to reshare, but I'm going to reshare a different window. So if you go to, right now, Socrates, and enter the room number 11755. So I'm going to type in that room number now, 11755. Okay, and you click join. So I will do that as well. And I'm going to do my name, and I'm going to call by my Twitter handle. So my name is Tekrov, and I see people are in it. And how well, I'm not doing this at the end of the lecture, but I'd love to hear how well you understand what's going on. Right now, I don't understand it that well. No, I see a bunch of people in the Socrative right now. Yahel is there, or Yahel? I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name, and Chen. And what did you learn in today's class? Let's see if it can do Hebrew, by the way. Someone asked me about that. And I'm not sure how it works with Hebrew myself. Ani Imaditi. Okay, I learned. Okay, that's all I'm writing. I'm submitting my answer right now. And please answer the teacher's question, etc. My question to you right now is, what do you think of the app Socrative? What are your thoughts? Would you use Socrative in the classroom? Type, please, in the quiz. I can see your answers, by the way. I'm going to show you my screen. And by the way, the Hebrew works perfectly. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back. I'm sorry if I'm jumping around, but I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to reshare. But this time I'm going to share my phone screen once again, so you can see what I see on my phone. So check this out, guys. So I have your answers and how you're doing with the lecture, and I'm the only one, I guess, who's not understanding today's lecture, which makes me feel pretty good. And I see that people can type in Hebrew, can type in English. It comes just as well. And people are asking whether they're going to use Socrative, and a bunch of you are saying you will. So that's Socrative, which is a great app. You can, by the way, you can create, if I click finish, I think I finished. I'm sorry if I knocked this out for someone, but I just click finish. And I'm going to go to launch. You can create a quiz. You can create what's called a space ticket, space race. Those obviously would take time. You can ask a quick multiple choice question, or true or false, or a short answer. But the simplest thing to do is just an exit ticket, where basically you don't do anything and you just ask questions, through the app. And then you respond through the app. So that's Socrative. This is one of my favorite assessment tools. I'm back now on the screen, and we're going to go to the next app that we're going to show off right now. So you should be seeing the screen with my slideshow. So moving right along, now I'm going to show you Quizlet. Quizlet is a great app for review. So whereas Socrative, is an exit ticket at the end of the class, but let's say I want to form the learning during the class. So we love to use Quizlet, especially for foreign language learning, or for really even the sciences or history, anywhere where you have to memorize rote knowledge, piece of information, because Quizlet is great at achieving fluency with an app. And let me show you Quizlet if you don't know. How many of you have seen Quizlet before? If you can just type whether you've heard of Quizlet before I gave this lecture or not. I'm just curious. I have a thumbs up, someone who's heard of it, someone who hasn't. So I'll be teaching you something new. So I think that the majority of people typing haven't heard of it, although some of you have. So let me just show it. So I'm going to open up Quizlet right now. So once again, I'm sorry, I'm going to screen sharing. It's a little bit disjointed, but I think this is hopefully making the lecture much more engaging for you. And I'm sharing my screen, and I'm going to Quizlet. Now, you can log into Quizlet using Google Login, which is what I did, and you'll see that there's a lot of teachers and students who create Quizlets. I have kids creating Quizlets as extra credit assignments. I have teachers creating Quizlets as well. But here's a Quizlet right now. So you'll see Quizlet does a lot of things. On the one hand, it's note cards. By the way, it's a learning tool. Let's start with that. Learn means now I have to type the word in Hebrew that only is going to go to, and I'm not really sure what the answer is. Is it going to be this? I don't know. I didn't create this, and my Brit is okay, but not wonderful. I apologize. Um, nope. Rock. Rock. Okay. Good. Excellent. Okay. I apologize. I made a mistake. Actually, that's good. Kids like when teachers make mistakes. You can go to cards, and this is just basically like note cards. By the way, the cards can actually even read you, although I don't think the sound works for Hebrew. I think the sound only works for English. So far, it's a nice note carding tool, but here's where it gets to do something that you really can't easily do with physical note cards. They have a matching game. The kids love this, and this is the game that I think actually really contributes to the learning of the student, because as you're going to see, it really helps them achieve fluency. Because when you start the game, now there's a clock ticking. Javier, okay, where is it? Okay, Iparon. Okay. Okay. Look, I got it in 20.7 seconds. The kids love this, and they will literally compete against each other to see who can get the fastest. Quizlet is available online, and it's available as an app. I believe that there is a slight difference between the games in the app version and the online version. I don't know which one. Honestly, I think both of them have good games, so you can decide which one have better games. But it has both. And once again, with Quizlet, this could be the teacher creating the cards for the students, or the students creating the cards themselves. And one of the things I like to do is I tell them you have to do this activity, and then send me a screenshot of your score. So most of you might know that on an iPhone, you press the power button and the home button, and the Android, I think it's similar, and it automatically takes, I believe, a screenshot. I don't know if it did that. I'm not going to show you my code. And then they can send the screenshot to you of their time. So this kid was actually very happy. He got the matching game, which I think was a hard one, in 9.97 seconds, which made him quite happy, as you see in this picture. So that's Quizlet. Another app, which is even more fun than Quizlet, slightly different. This is not really the Quizlet is still a model of the students are reviewing themselves. Kahoot is the students are competing against themselves when they're reviewing. So Kahoot has two different parts. It has a website, and the website is, so someone just linked to the flashcard there. The website for Kahoot, I want to just make sure I type it correctly when I give it to you. The website for Kahoot is getkahoot.com, I believe it is. Yeah. The website for Kahoot, I'm going to put it on the thing, is getkahoot.com. You create your activities using the website, and then you make games. So let me show you, for example, I'm going to go screen sharing, and I'm going to share one of my Kahoot tab over here. And so here's my Kahoot that I've created. I've created a number of different Kahoots. Here's one I did actually for a assessment of a different training session I gave in the past. So I click play. I create the Kahoot in advance, and we're going to do what's called the classic mode, which means each student is doing it themselves. The team mode means that teams are playing together. And we're going to click classic. And now what happens is the kid is going to open the app. So you can go to the App Store and look for Kahoot, or you can go to the website and go to Kahoot.it, and it gives you a number. So the number here is 5402697. It's 5402697, I believe it is. Let me just look one more time at the Kahoot, 5402697. And then you can run a Kahoot. So for example here, if someone even knows how to get onto Kahoot, so I'm going to go onto Kahoot myself, and I'm going to play, and I'm going to show you what it's like for a player. Actually, I can't show you what it's like for a player. You put in your name once you get on. I'm going to see if someone actually gets on, and I'm going to ask you some questions. So if you go to, I'll tell you what to do right now. Go to Kahoot.it, with the game pin 5402697, and you can actually play yourself. Imagine an entire class playing this. So if you want to try it yourself, once again, you can either get the Kahoot app or you can go to 5402697. Right now, I believe, let me just make sure you can see the tab correctly. Oh, you see the wrong tab. So I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to show you the right tab so you can actually, here. So that tab should be what you're seeing now, and everyone go on, and we're going to play Kahoot together, just like a student would play. So we click start. Are you ready? And there's going to be some questions. You're not going to necessarily know the answers. A coverage assignment I didn't talk about here, so you would have to guess what a coverage assignment is. So I'm just going to skip that right now, and I'm going to go to next. But I'm going to go to what is a formative assessment? We talked about that. So let's see. People try to answer, and you answer just by giving the little shape that you want while you're watching the board. And then when everyone answers, we're going to have a leaderboard. Okay? Okay, the clock is going. The clock is going. And oh, I didn't answer. Okay, I answered right there. Okay, there we go. Oh my gosh. Someone's gotten, okay. And then we go next. And this is the thing the kids love the most. There's a leaderboard. Imagine a class of 20 students playing Kahoot together. I'm going to just go back to my presentation. I think you got the point here. Imagine a class of 20 students playing Kahoot together. Now they're all using their phones, and they're all looking at the board, and they're all actively engaged. Now the one thing I will warn you, if you use Kahoot in the classroom, is your classroom won't be quiet. They're going to be loud. They're going to be screaming. They're going to be cheering. They're going to be learning. I remember I did this once, and the principal was in the hallway, and they ran down the hall to ask what was going on in my room because they thought that there was chaos. And then they walked in, and what they saw was joyful learning, which is I love. Okay, I'm going to move on because I have to get questions soon. There's a similar app called Nearpod. Nearpod is a really awesome real-time assessment app that lets you combine a presentation that they're doing with real-time assessment. We're not going to Nearpod together, but I'm going to share it on my screen just so you can see it. You can get Nearpod on the website, or you can get it online. So I'm just going to share my screen Nearpod right over here. And let me show you Nearpod just for a second. Where is my Nearpod? There it is. Now I'm going to show you the teacher view of Nearpod right now. We're not going to do it all together because the clock is ticking and we're going to run out of time very soon. But let's say I wanted to do a Nearpod about using iPads in the classroom. A similar presentation to this one I made many years ago. So I could launch a lesson. Now the students all get on just by the same way. They have a code and they go to nearpod.com. And it's similar to, okay, and there's the code they would put in. And I'm going to click continue. But here, in this case, I am in complete control. Everything they see on their devices is from me. So therefore, if they're on the Nearpod, they can't do anything else. And also, I can embed assessment activities into the Nearpod. So right off the bat, the presentation is completely controlled by me. And there are assessments, there are videos, there are slides, there are all these different items from the Nearpod. So I could have a question and they have to answer. It's a pretty incredible program here. One thing that it does is it lets you have a presentation where the teacher is in total control of what's going on in the classroom and what's going on in everybody's screen. And there are interactive assessments embedded in the Nearpod. So Nearpod is another app that I really love. I'm sorry I don't have more time to show, but the clock is ticking and I want you to have time for questions. So there's Nearpod. Let me go a little bit further. and we're going to talk a little bit about the flipped classroom. I alluded to this earlier. And basically, the flipped classroom means that I'm creating a video for the student to watch prior to a lesson. This could either be a video that they watch at home, or sometimes I create a video they watch the first 5-10 minutes in school. And what the flipped classroom does is it takes something that's inherently teacher-centered, the lecture, and put the learning into the hands of the students so the kids can stop it, they can start it, they can rewind, they can fast forward. Often I will combine a flipped classroom lecture that I create with some type of assessment like a Socrates or like a Nearpod or something else, just to make sure that they actually watch the lecture, give them a couple of simple questions. And then in class, we will go further and we will discuss in greater depth the topic, because I know that the basic coverage assignment has already been done through the lecture. One great app for that, this is an iPad app specifically, is Explain Everything. It costs money. This is the only app that I'm showing you that costs money. I think it's $5. There are a lot of other apps you can use to create flip videos. First of all, you can just use video on your phone. But let's say you want to record what's going on your screen. So I will just type a bunch of them, and you can find them on Google. So if you're on a Chromebook, or you want to just use a web-based device, Screencastify is a way to go. If you're on an iPad, you can use Show Me, or you can use EduCreations. These are both free, or you can use Explain Everything. And all of them do basically the same thing. They let you record flip videos, except Explain Everything is much more sophisticated in what you can do. I remember once when I made a flip video, and I like to do videos when I teach the prophets. I like to make a video of myself reading and translating the text before the lesson, and then in class we go in greater depth. I make a little quiz. I remember the kids were having a whole argument over one of the answers of the quiz, and it was in the hallway, and they came to me, and they took out their phone, and they put on the video, and we got to the point, and then the kids saw themselves who was right and who was wrong, or interpretations. And I just thought it was really cool that the kids were learning in the hallway with me, using their phone, watching me, which is just, I don't know, I thought that was really very fascinating. Now I'm going to talk just for the last 5 minutes on some of the newer stuff out there, which I would say this is more experimental. You know, the pedagogy is not as proven, but it can be done. One of them is augmented reality. Now, you all might remember augmented reality from the game that was the craze of the summer called Pokemon Go. So basically, augmented reality means that I use a device, usually my phone, to augment, to add to the physical reality in front of me. So this could be very simple. For example, a QR code. So we have assignments, very often we have assignments for the kids that they create a presentation that they at a history fair. And one of the pieces of the assignment is inside making a science fair board and making an artifact, maybe creating something. They all have to create something online, a website or a slideshow or a video, and then put a QR code on their board. So if someone scans the QR code using an app like Scan, it will open up a whole new world out there for them to analyze and look at. So that's one example of augmented reality. Using a QR code, you've all seen QR codes in our school, everything's a QR code. Because it really allows you to take a physical sign that can only have a limited amount of text, and through the process of the phone, enhance it with a video online, with a full-fledged website, with a paper. You can do stuff that you couldn't otherwise do. Now, something even cooler is an app called Erasma. And Erasma is an app that lets you actually augment physical artifacts or pictures. So, for example, we had in our Evening of the Arts, where we show up all the artwork, every piece of artwork was also an Erasma. So what the student did was, while they were creating their art, they were recording using their phone, and iPhones have this built-in time-lapse videos of themselves creating their art, of them drawing the art. And when someone scanned that picture using the app Erasma, they actually saw a video of the students creating the art. So normally we only celebrate the end product of the artwork, but through Erasma, we were able to celebrate the process of the creating of the artwork. Another example is I had a project where they created pottery because they were actually creating pottery just like Jeremiah created pottery in the book of Jeremiah. And then each of them had to create an erasma, and I'm going to demonstrate this now. What they had to do with the erasma, they had to create an erasma of their pottery, describing their pottery. So I'm going to show this right now. This is pretty cool. So I'm going to do screen sharing, and I'm going to open up Erasma. Can everyone else hear me? Or is it only one person who can't hear me? Or is there a problem with everyone? I'm going to stop for a moment. Please tell me if you can hear. I want to make sure that people can hear. Shane, maybe you should look at your computer because it seems like everyone else can hear. So right now I'm screen sharing. Refresh your page, Shane. And I'm using Erasma. Erasma is an app that works on an iPhone. It also works on an Android. And now I'm using Erasma, and I'm opening it up. And I can't go through the process of how to create an Erasma right now, although you can look on my blog, and you can probably find on TechRav, techrav.blogspot.com. If you search for Erasma, and I'll spell it correctly right now, you'll find where I have a step-by-step on how to create an Erasma. But let me show it. I'm going to use my phone, and I'm going to scan this picture, and a video of myself describing my artwork pops up on the picture on my phone. What I've literally done is augmented the reality in front of me using Erasma, which is incredible. So this is what the kids all did themselves. They took the artwork and they created videos of themselves creating the art. And then when you scan the artwork, you actually got the video of them creating the art. So this is augmented reality in action. It's really amazing. It's experimental. It's been around only for maybe a couple of years, but something I highly recommend you test out. And it's really something that is relatively easy to do because every kid, or certainly every teacher in the room, has a smartphone. And a smartphone, or Android or an iPhone, can do Erasma really, really easily. So this is kind of a tremendous activity, pretty high level to do. Now I'm just going to talk a little bit at the end about virtual reality. This is really experimental. We haven't really unlocked it, but to realize that our phones now can be devices, can be portals to a virtual world. Every iPhone and certainly every Android can connect to something called Google Cardboard. This is actually branded Google Cardboard that I made for a conference. I ran the Jewish Educators Network at the ISTE conference, which is I highly recommend if you're in the United States. Look for ISTE. I'll type where you can get it. It's the largest educational technology conference in North America. This year it's going to be in San Antonio. It's always the end of June. So I was at the ISTE conference, and I lead what's called the Jewish Educators Network at ISTE, and we actually got sponsorship from the Jewish Education Project. So we made branded Google Cardboard headsets. Google Cardboard headsets you can buy on Amazon for maybe $5, maybe $10 max. We bought a set of 30 for $100, I think. And there are a number of different types of apps that you can find. There are lots and lots of games. Education Let's So that you can use for virtual reality. So, for example, a student can create something using Photoshop that's really just a long picture, and they can use something like a Google Cardboard to then do virtual reality, or you can buy for relatively not a lot of money a camera that does virtual reality. These used to cost a lot of money, but nowadays you can buy a camera called the Ricoh Theta. I'm gonna send a link right now. I think the Ricoh Theta is maybe $300. And Ricoh Theta can make video in virtual reality, or there are apps you can use on your phone to make virtual reality. Not as good as the Ricoh Theta, but there are apps on your phone for virtual reality. So that's experimental. It's very engaging. I still think there's a lot to be done in education. It's not there yet, but I just wanted to end with something like that so you could see that's where things are going with AR and VR, virtual reality and augmented reality. Now we have 15 more minutes left, so I will take questions at this point. So you could type your questions here and your comments, etc. We still have 15 minutes left. There might be announcements in the background right now. I warn you. This is the one time of day there's going to be some announcements going on. So I'm just waiting for people to type their questions at this point. I thank you very much. You've been a very engaged audience, but I welcome your questions at this moment. We're going to end precisely at 10:30, which is Israel time, 3:30 from North America, East Coast, and obviously different time zones. So we still have about 13 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Tzvi, for interesting lecture. I opened the microphone of all of you so you can use it for questions. Does anyone have any question?
Yeah, I'm scrolling right now down to see if there are any questions I didn't answer. But I think I just answered them on the fly as we were going along. Some people shared some interesting links, by the way, in the chat. So it would be worth, Sarit shared some wonderful links about Kahoot in the chat and Quizlet as well. So people could please reference back to those links as well.
I saw that Reuven asks question.
He asked about Kahoot supporting Hebrew, and we answered it during the lecture. Kahoot does support Hebrew. Here's the question here. What percentage of your teachers are proficient mobile ed tech users? That's a great question. I'm going to answer that in two parts. What percentage of my teachers are proficient using their phones? 95%. What percentage of the teachers are using mobile in the classroom? So it really depends on how you define mobile. If it's something like a Google Apps assignment, or it's something like a project-based learning assignment, I'd say that maybe half of them are doing those types of assignments. When it comes to actually using your phone, I think teachers are a little bit more averse for the reasons that I began with. That the phone, and I feel this myself, I feel this kind of give and take. On the one hand, there's all these tools, and certainly if I'm doing a project-based learning activity, like an augmented reality activity, like a Quizlet, like a Kahoot, then certainly I'm using my phone. But those activities are very worthwhile, but not if you do them every day. They're worthwhile if you do them once a week or every other week. On a daily basis, I don't know if I want my kids using their phones in class, because I think with a laptop or with even an iPad, the educational benefit outweighs the distraction. With the phone, I think it's switched. That the distraction, like a Snapchat. I guess you could use Snapchat for education, but most of my kids are using Snapchat to make silly pictures of themselves. And I don't want them doing that during class. So that's where I kind of toe my own line. Any apps or ideas for creating educational games? Oh, that's a great question. Apps or ideas for educational games. So I'm going to Google the answer because I know the answer, but I want to just find the correct. I'm going to give a shout out to a great company that I don't work for at all, but I'm enamored by. Jewish Interactive is the company, and they just recently, within the last 6 months, came out with an app called JITAP. JITAP is I think it's only an iPhone app. I don't think they have an Android version. And JITAP is an app that lets you create games, Jewish educational games for the iPhone or the iPad. It is an amazing app, and it's amazing on two levels. It's a great app for teachers to create games for the student to interact with, or students to create games in a much more student-centered world to show their learning. It's wonderful. I didn't showcase it here. We don't really use it in Frisch just for the simple reason that JITAP is a much better app for the younger grades, I would say for grades 1 through 6, just based on the content. It's not really something for older kids. But if you have younger grades, and you K through 6 at least, and you're using iPads or you're using Android tablets in the classroom, JITAP is a must. It definitely works on the iPad. Maybe one of you can research whether it works on the Android tablet yet. I'm not quite sure because it's so new. That's a great question. How can we measure the added value of integrating technology when we say it is not adding anything and maybe the opposite? It's a great question. I think obviously the research, and as I talked about earlier, there are times when technology clearly, in meta-analysis of research, technology is helpful in many different student-centered learning environments. Not necessarily as helpful if it's a teacher-centered and the only technology is to take notes, as I talked about. But I think really the measure is your own students. I mean, you look at the research, but then you look at what's going on in your classroom and in your school. And as you pointed out, there's not a lot of research about Jewish education and technology. I've actually seen that myself. I was just having a conversation today about that on the phone with someone from a major foundation. And there isn't. Maybe someone can do that research. Maybe it'll be me, or maybe it'll be someone in this group. It would be very, very beneficial. So really what we need to use now is A, to read the research that is out there in the general educational world, because much of it can be applied to the Jewish educational world as well. But B, just as importantly, to do your own action research, both in your classroom and in your school, to see what works and what doesn't. And just like the technology startups that are very nimble, that's the right word, nimble, that the word now is start up something quick, but then be willing to move really fast to something else. When it comes to ed tech in the classroom, you have to be nimble. You have to be willing to try something. You have to be willing to fail forward, as they say, to learn from mistakes, but then also willing to change. That's why some teachers just are averse, because they're not really into change, because you have to move in order to find what would work best. Can you share other AR or VR opportunities you did with your classroom? Great question. I mean, for AR, I've used Erasmus, and we've used QR codes extensively. QR codes for everything. Every sign in our school has a QR code. Every assignment, almost any project-based learning assignment, I will tell them to create something online, like a Google slideshow or a video, and then link to it with a QR code. Something like Erasmus, I mean, the examples I gave you are where you make a picture and it pops up some type of video. Erasmus and QR codes in general might be also great if you're doing a scavenger hunt. You have a situation kind of like you can make a virtual museum where they walk around and they scan it and they learn stuff about each painting or each picture, or they go around the school. VR we have not used as much yet. VR is really brand new, so I can't yet share examples yet of VR in the classroom. How is teacher education responding to integration of mobile devices in teacher training? It's a good question. I'm not sure. I'm not going to. By teacher education, if you mean to education in schools, where I am on a daily basis, I'd say that we are training our teachers to use various devices in the classroom, obviously with the caveat, as I described before, that not one size fits all, and not every activity should have the same device. As far as teacher training on the university level, I don't know the answer to that question. Maybe there's someone else here who does. I can't. Any other questions at this point? Okay, thank you very much. Aryeh, I think we might be signing off.
Yes, Tzvi, thank you again. And to all of you, thank you for joining us. And I hope to see you in the next lecture.
Now, just to give you some contact information, I'm sorry I'm cutting you off, Aryeh. The best way to reach me is to tweet me at TechRav. I really like my Twitter a lot. So tweet me at TechRav. If you have questions, if you have contacts, then I can show you, other ways to reach me as well. Can we get a copy of the presentation? That's a good question for Aryeh.
Yes, at the end of the seminar, you will receive all the recordings of the lectures and a copy of the presentations.
Yes, and I might be posting about the presentation on my blog as well, if you check out my blog at techrav@blogspot.com. Thank you very much, everyone. This was really a pleasure, and you were a very engaged audience. It was definitely, I think, very meaningful for me educationally, and wherever you are in the world, have a good night or have a good afternoon. I'm not sure if there's anyone here. I still say have a good morning, but enjoy the rest of your day.